Hello. So this is about Amendment liberalism, and in a way, it's to Robert Wallace. I've put a link to his channel in the description. And as you can see here, I'm not up to date with all of Robert's videos. If you look back, now some of these, like this monetization, it's not accurate which ones I've seen. I've seen some of these that it doesn't say. I haven't seen this corporate hegemony, but I'm pretty sure I saw this monetization as YouTube's weapon. So I've been watching Robert for years, and so I'm familiar with his positions, and recently he says he's a leftist. I don't see how he fits that categorization exactly, but I don't see many other categorizations he fits, and those are just categorizations. So that's neither here nor there. I take him as his word, though it just made me want to say what I think the Second Amendment liberal position is on the Second Amendment, according to me. I'm not reporting what other liberals in favor of the Second Amendment are saying. I'm saying what I think. So, all right. Now, as I said, this is just a video on what I think Second Amendment liberalism is about, but I'm interested in Robert Wallace's reply, and I've watched, I don't know, about a third of Agent of Doubt on the issue of Second Amendment and to Robert Wallace and about armories, and some of this overlaps with what I've already seen in that video, which I'll finish later. Now, but the point is, I don't have to wait because this isn't a reply, but is part of the conversation. That's the idea, or hopefully. All right, so the Second Amendment reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay. Now, this has created a big argument, and the Supreme Court has weighed in on this about whether there's an individual right, or if it's a state right approach, or some hybrid. The states' rights approach here is pretty interesting because that whole approach, it's not like what normally states' rights is associated with the conservative position. The states' rights approach here has to do with saying that this part about a well-regulated militia has some immediate bearing on the existence of the right or not. Now, I believe there is an individual right. I agree with the results of the Supreme Court that this does secure an individual right and gives a reason for granting that individual right. Okay, so it's like you might buy a gun for hunting. And again, I'm kind of from the country, in the suburbs, and family from the country. I've known and lived in places. I lived in Boulder, Colorado. There's people there, now this is the 80s, but whatever. This still is true. That hunt and get a couple $1,000s worth of meat to put in the freezer, um, and it's like a kind of income, which arguably in the state of nature, the economy based on the state of nature, you have a right to do to get an income just from picking berries and eating those or hunting. So that's an individual right. However, the reason we as a state grant the individual right is to enable a well-regulated militia because it's necessary to our security. So the way I interpret that is that you don't have to serve in a militia in order to get this right, but we have to have a militia in order for this right to be justified. So the way I would do it is, yeah, you have to register your gun. I don't really mind not registering a gun. The registration could be a very light or just even assumed registration of a 22 rifle or a pistol. Now, Agent of Doubt was pointing out that, well, pistols are they might not be military grade a weapon. Well, they are military grade, right? The low watt man-on-man military grade weapon. Anyway, I think that if you're just going to get a pistol or a regular rifle or a hunting rifle, you can just get it. You should probably have to register. And in principle, the fact that you're in this registration list means that when the Canadians invade, right, that's an idea I'm going to use a lot. When the Canadians invade, you can be called up. We can say, hey, we heard you had a gun. You know, the Canadians are invading. And you're, it's on the benefit of the doubt, but we're assuming you will honor the the call. And as you get up in a bigger levels of lethality and military grade weapons, where you get to automatic assault rifles or automatic rifles, period, or also, you know, bazookas and anti-aircraft, handheld anti-aircraft missile launchers and tanks, actual, you know, armored vehicles, things like that. What's going on is, in addition to saying, "Oh, I'll show up if the Canadians actually invade," it's you want to have a military assault rifle, then you know you have to come to the militia. And you need, like the National Guard, and you need to, similar to, not that the National Guard counts, but similar to, you have to come and you have to show that you're good with the weapon, you know how to handle it, that you can, it's your, you know, it's your rifle. It's not the best rifle, but it's your rifle, and you will know how to rebuild it, or whatever the, you know, the ethos is of if you are able to have access to, say at a local armory, um, armored vehicles, then you have to go out there and drill with them every once in a while. And since there is an armory, you know, if you want to have an automatic rifle of some sort, then you probably have to do guard duty at the armory, you know, once a month or once every 6 months. I don't know. I mean, that's variable. We should discuss how much the commitment to the militia that you would have to do to get certain access to certain kinds of weapons. You know, you need to prove that you will practice with that weapon and that you have a safe place to practice with it and things like this. And that's the kind of Second Amendment liberal that I am. And it's true that for a lot of liberals, any Second Amendment liberal status of any sort is anathema to them. But it's the Constitution. And, you know, until we change the Constitution, um, I don't think you can really criticize an American for supporting the current law as it was written in our original, um, well, it's not really the original document, but in our one of our founding documents. I mean, the Declaration of Independence is our actual founding document. Um, I'll finish with the fact that I think we should have a new tradition in the United States that when people become, when a citizen becomes 16 years old, that they should also sign the Declaration of Independence. That the idea of the Declaration is that it takes effect when the last person signs it. And there should never be a last person that signs it. We should just keep signing it. At 16, everybody would sign the Declaration of Independence or decide that they weren't into it. Now, by doing that, you somewhat accept the Constitution and the other laws of the United States, but not in an unqualified way. I mean, you can, you know, you think that it has to, you could think the Constitution has to change. I don't want to get rid of the Second Amendment. People that do should see if they can pull that off, and until then, it's the law of the land. The Declaration of Independence, however, is very interesting and is more a declaration of individual sovereignty. I consider myself a progressive libertarian. Now, progressive is a funny term. People have their ideas about it. The Republican Party was progressive when it started and whatnot. It's just an idea that we need progress, that things aren't good enough, and it's possible to make progress. There's people that think that things are good enough already, and that um, there's people that think you can't make progress. So I'm progressive. Libertarian is because really that's the center of the political ideas, individual liberty. Um, that's what you're maximizing, people's ability to go wherever they want, to pursue whatever kind of career that they want, to make a little money and do what they're really interested in on the side, like if they're an unappreciated artist or whatever. So, um, back to the Second Amendment, just to summarize, because that's the point of this video. I think that first of all, it's obsessive to get all paranoid about this. The Democrats have never shown that they're against the Second Amendment. They might want to restrict um, automatic rifles, but not all of them do. But they have enough pressure in that direction. You could worry about that and the whole slippery, slopey kind of thing. But they've, had chances to like crack down on guns like they've done in other relatively similar, you know, semi-conservative countries like Australia, and they haven't. Um, and there's a lot of people like me that I'm as progressive as you can get. I believe we need universal health care. We should have free college. Unlike Democrats, I actually am for pretty open borders. Now, when you say open borders, I just mean uh, permeable borders. I don't think it should be open to invading armies. I think we should have forts and bases along the border, and an invading army um, would know that they had no chance. Uh, but individuals that haven't committed any crime, it's not a crime to come here and say, hey, can I be an American? I can't live in Honduras anymore. That's not a crime, and it shouldn't be. And basically, if you're healthy and don't have a criminal record, you might be delayed while we confirm that, but you should have a right to go all around the world, wherever you want, including other people's borders, is my view. That's the libertarian part. Um, now, I'm not sure exactly what part of Robert Wallace's philosophy that Robert Wallace thinks is the left part. Now, I see an empathetic person and all this stuff that he's definitely not some sort of Trumpite. And I like you, Robert, if that matters at all. I believe you're coming from an honest place. That's my basic judgment of people in this conversation. And and yet you seem to believe in so many of these kind of anti-SJW memes and themes that I just honestly wonder which part of you do you think is the leftist part? And also, I'm interested as a liberal that believes in the Second Amendment the way I just described it, that we do have the right to have arms. Small firearms should just be more or less on, we give you the benefit of the doubt. You'll defend your country when the time comes. Really powerful arms are like, well, we want to check. You're going to show up every 3 months to muster. And, if you can't even get along at muster with your commanding officer, you're not well regulated enough to own a bazooka, that kind of thing. So I'm interested in an answer to those, and I'm also interested in which is the Second Amendment part, not in an accusatory way, because uh, categories are pretty stupid, misleading, and often invented even to manipulate. So screw that. Um, and yet, I think this is somewhat contentious if taken with the intent that I'm offering it, in that uh, you seem to be falling, Robert, for a lot of reactionary rhetoric, falling for or believe in. And, I'd love clarity on that. All right, I'm going to take off. Let's see if there's any. Okay, there's some chats. Beeble Brox and Kush, no, King Kush. Okay, Beeble Brox. Liberals everywhere's run. Beeblebrock says, is there a way to put this up on the screen? I guess I could do it like this. Beeblebrock says, regulated being key. The KG gun humpers out there don't want any regulation or admit they're not in the military, aka militia. Right. Well, see, the not wanting any regulation is, that becomes a complicated of like, how else would you do it if there isn't some, regular way of doing it? But it's weird that just the whole idea of how incomprehensible of no regulation, but that's secondary. The main thing is like, look, the Second Amendment talks about the militia. We know they love militias. There's some sort of illegal, unregulated militias, and that they have, the Bundy thing, they have promoted and supported. So why would they? It's almost like they're anti-military in their interpretation of the Second Amendment. Like the idea. Oh, I was going to say this. So I was reading up on the, uh, on the biography. I read a biography and on a Benjamin Franklin. And a big idea from the Second Amendment was that we don't need a standing army, an overseas army. We can have a semi-standing army. Some people are paid full time, but basically the bulk of the soldiers are just people that own guns, that know how to use them, and they can be called up, and we could avoid having an international army. So now he was living in a time, Benjamin Franklin, before airplanes, before nuclear weapons and missiles. So, obviously there's an issue there. You could say, hey, no, we need a regular standing army. We need international bases or whatever because of, being able to refuel planes, or you can make arguments like that. But it's still true that if you were to even say nuke a bunch of the nation, if you had a well-armed populace, whoever's left is going to be like impossible to truly occupy. So it doesn't really change things, and it's an interesting idea. Now, in this modern world, would say, well, other people didn't stop their standing armies, and because of air forces and things, an actual standing army with millions to spend on radar stations and stuff is necessary. Still, there's a balance. A lot of our national independence and security could be, at the point when there's an invasion after the air raid bombing attacks, um, that there's a lot of security to be had through the Second Amendment idea of a militia. Um, Beeblebrock says they're not weapons until you've hurt or killed another human being with one. That's an interesting point. I don't know. I think they're weapon. I guess It's a weird thing. It's like murder or killing. It's not really called a weapon because you killed something to eat, but it was because the weapon is to defend yourself. The weapon almost means defend yourself. Even if you're going to war and you're shooting them first at that point, it's because the war's been declared and it already got started. Whoever started it. So that's an interesting thing. They're not weapons until you've hurt or killed another human being with one. Everyone else should be saying firearm. I always wondered about that. Like in this sense, is a rifle a firearm? I don't know. Pistols, almost firearm means pistol to me. But I get what you're saying. If the gun humpeters, which is a good insult, really, it's a good burn, want to be honest about their nitnoid squabbling. Nobody running for office has ever talked about getting rid of the Second Amendment. Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the funny thing about, okay, Bernie, our ultimate socialist and everything. Well, he's, a D minus for a Democrat. I mean, that means, no, he doesn't really want to take guns. He might think you should regulate this or buttons or clip rounds. Oh, yeah, Agent of Doubt said he wasn't sure about the clip round kind of thing. In principle, I do think it's kind of pointless. But as a practical matter, since we're not doing free mental health care, we're not doing all the other things that might deal with the problem of people that have access to weapons and are going to have nefarious purposes. Um, yeah, it's like with the opiate crisis. This is an analogy because let's say you just stop making opiates. Well, there'd be a lot less to go. When you say who overdoses, well, people buying opiates on the illegal market, and then, but what if you just didn't make opiates in the whole country? Well, because who's making the opiates that people are overdosing from? Yeah, there's heroin, but who's making a lot of the, people that overdose from methadone or whatever? It's pharmaceuticals. Now, would you want to, obviously, if you didn't make any opiates, the illegal market wouldn't have a place to skim off of and get it. Um, but you wouldn't want to do that. People need opiates for painkillers. So I see it as a very analogous situation. You can't argue that getting rid of guns wouldn't cut down on gun deaths. You can say, but we need our guns, and so we're going to address it through mental health or other things, restricting who can have, guns based on the lethality and how much you're willing to enter into the well-regulated militia, arguably something that the SCOTUS has weighed in on, against my position, but that's still an open question as well, obviously. Um, so anyway, okay. Beeble said the founding fathers were not libertarians. They did believe in liberty, not the same thing. True, but when I say I'm a libertarian, I'm talking about John Stuart Mill and whatnot, and his idea of liberty. He points out in On Liberty that the just social conventions are as big of an impact, negative impact on your actual liberty as as the government. That the government's not really the primary thing. It could be legal to wear a dress in town, but if people are going to hang you up and throw stones or kill you or not let you have a job so you can make a living because of it, you don't really have that liberty, even though it's quote unquote illegal. So this is what I don't like, that the left has ceded to the right the concept of liberty. Um, they're stupid to do that. It's a very popular idea and is important. And it's one of these ideas that has a meaning that not everybody that discusses it understands or recognizes. And there's no replacement. There's no other term in which to grab this idea of liberty, which is a measurable thing of how much can you move around. How much do you have the chance to try things you might want to try? How much seed funds do you have to try things for as long as it would take for it to succeed? How much does your society support you trying to do these things that you freely want to do? And obviously, we can't fund every single thing that you want to do, but it's still measurable how much that's the case. King Kush, the avocado, says rat lines. Says the border looks wide open 80 miles out at sea. Go deep sea fishing for tuna off San Diego. See if you see any border patrols. King Kush says bear. I don't know, is that a Nazi reference? And King Kush says in Tasmania. Well, probably when those comments were posted in the context of what I was saying, it would make sense if I really understood what the reference was. So, King Kush, come back, leave a comment explaining what you meant by intends. Opium source. Really, I didn't know that. But that's opium too. I think the real problem we have is the pharmaceuticals have been putting out tens of billions of dollars of pills they knew were going out to the black market. And they're responsible for that, just like Queen Victoria was responsible for importing opium into China to weaken it, which worked. So. Well, you don't. Okay, so Beeple rocks. This will, I guess, this will be my last thing. Probably the Senate just approved 250 billion for defense spending. We don't need state by state militias. Well, it's like 700, over 700 billion a year, and there's some dark money that's probably 700 or a billion a year. Um, the point, like taking it from the Benjamin Franklin angle, is that 250 should be spent on these militias. These militias should be, there could be a militia version of the Army Corps of Engineers, fire, hurricane, relief, and reaction, things like that. So the point is not to additionally spend. The point is to lay off the thousands of bases overseas and emphasize um, local defense, right? Which is much cheaper and very, very, very daunting. Um, like with North Korea, they have this massive military, this huge military of soldiers. But if they were ever broken in, the citizens have no way to defend themselves. And it's better if all the citizens have a way to defend themselves. It could be chaos. They all have different interests. But in a democracy, if you're giving people the vote and trying to make that have power, but you also admit that that one of the real power bases in the world is weapons, then people also that also has to be distributed. And if you want to think about it, that's a communist idea too. The distribution of the ownership of power, which includes guns. So I'm going to hang out uh, elsewhere for a bit until I might make another video when this clears. You have to wait for a while. Baguettes for Aglet says we need economic democracy. I like the sound of that. We'd have to discuss what you meant specifically. All right, cheers. Thanks for the interactors. Talk to you later. And Mr. Bob Wallace, I would love a response. I think you know who I am. I've been commenting to you and stuff, but I don't know if you watch my videos. Maybe somebody that watches you will mention, or somehow, maybe I will. But I'm interested in a response to this take on the Second Amendment and the other issues that I've talked about. Yeah, thanks to all the commenters again, and I will talk to you later.